everyone, my name is Shauna, in case you don't know, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be clearing up some misconceptions and stereotypes about PTSD. PTSD is obviously post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's a lot of misconceptions about it based on the way that media portrays it and based on just what people generally assume PTSD looks like. However, PTSD looks different in each person. For some people, it can follow the stereotypical patterns of PTSD that everyone thinks of when they think of the phrase PTSD, but for other people, it can be entirely different. First of all, let me talk about my qualifications to talk about this. I have PTSD, I have done different exposures for it. I've done general talk therapy to help with depression and the reason why I have PTSD in a whole. I have done some exposure therapy that has had a little bit of a success for this. However, exposure therapy for PTSD is one of the major ways to treat it, but it's very, very challenging because you have to trust your therapist enough to openly talk about what's going on. And I found that when I did exposure therapy for PTSD, my flashbacks increased in frequency after I had each session. There is also something called EMDR. I've been really interested in trying EMDR. However, I have a chronic illness, in case you don't know, and it's very hard to go to appointments in person. And the therapists I've talked to who have done EMDR said that it works best to do it in person. So unfortunately, I haven't really had a chance to try EMDR yet. First things first, any event that the brain interprets as traumatic can cause PTSD. Normally when people hear the phrase PTSD, they think of veterans and they think of rape victims. However, there is such a wide range of people who can have PTSD and what it's from. For me, my PTSD started when I was bullied when I was 14. However, my PTSD continued to get worse after that. So eventually some of my triggers and some of the reasons why I was getting flashbacks weren't connected to bullying. They were connected to just friendship issues that I was having, but because my brain was in such a vulnerable state, I was getting flashbacks to these friendship issues that weren't exactly bullying. If you end up in the hospital for whatever reason, that could be a trigger to start PTSD. If you lose a pet in a really traumatic way, if you get in a car crash, all these different things can cause PTSD. It's not just rape and war that can cause it like a lot of media portrays. Another thing is people with PTSD can't control their triggers. So while there is some obvious triggers that will be bigger and make sense, like seeing a specific face of someone who hurt us or hearing gunshots if you had some traumatic event like a war or a murder, those type of things, those are obvious triggers, but it can also be some much smaller things that become triggers. Like for me, there is a Broadway play that is a trigger for my flashbacks. Do you know how hard that is to like Broadway plays and to have one of the most popular Broadway plays be a trigger for my flashbacks? It is challenging because I'm trying to be part of the Broadway fan community, but I have to avoid everything to do with this play or else I'll get flashbacks triggered. There's also an anime that's a trigger for me, and it's not a super common anime, but there is quite a few people who enjoy the anime. So while I'm trying to avoid everything to do with the anime, I will see it because I'm part of the cosplay and anime community. There are people who cosplay the characters from the show, and next thing you know, I'm getting a flashback. It is not fun. I've seen recently in some media this harmful portrayal of PTSD in which the person becomes violent when they get a flashback. That isn't really the case. I mean, I suppose that could happen in some very extreme cases, but I would say that's more losing touch with reality as opposed to flashbacks where you're reliving what happened in your brain. Most of the time it'll include your visual sphere, so you'll be seeing something that happened that was traumatic in the past. And people don't necessarily become rare mod straight having this flashback. They could just look relaxed and be having it. I know for me, when I get it, I can sometimes get out of the way. I had an accommodation when I was taking school in person to leave the classroom when I had a flashback, so I was able to get up and get out, but I couldn't stop it from happening, and I sort of became a little bit like a zombie, just trying to get away from the situation and be away from other people so that people don't see me having one, because it's not fun and it's something that I don't like other people to see me have. If you know someone with PTSD, the biggest things that you can do to help and be supportive of them is ask them, what should I do if you have a flashback? For me personally, I need some sort of physical grounder to help me get into reality, and I need that to be an outside thing. A lot of therapists have tried to tell me oh, when you're getting a flashback, just remind yourself that you're not there, that it's not real. But I can't do that because I'm so sucked into it that I think I'm genuinely in the past. So what really helps for me is that I have beautiful kitties, and these kitties have been able to sense when I've had flashbacks, and they've come and helped me out. At the end of this video, I'll show my kitties just for fun. But my cats have made a huge difference in my life. They've really helped me to overcome my PTSD. I definitely still have flashbacks, but they have helped ground me, and they have helped just give me the strength to keep pushing on when I'm in the midst of really bad flashbacks. Another thing you can do to be supportive of people with PTSD is that since people with PTSD can't control the triggers, if they ask you not to bring up something specific, try your best to not bring it up and apologize if you do bring it up. I lost tons of friends when my PTSD was at its worst because I would ask them to not bring up people's names or not to bring up certain shows and stuff, and they would just refuse to do that. I've had people say like, oh well, if I can't bring up this person that you tell me to not bring up, then I want you to not bring up another person that I dislike. And it's like, no, it's not the same thing. There's a difference between disliking someone and literally having flashbacks triggered by that person. And I know for me personally, when I get flashbacks, it's very hard to control the fact that a lot of times when I get flashbacks, I'm flashing back to a time when I was suicidal. So it's hard to like fight myself and be like, no, you have a reason to keep surviving, which is another reason why my cats have been so helpful, because they give me that reason. And so when they come and help bring me back from the flashbacks, if I am a little bit suicidal after it happens, then my cats can be like a reminder of why I need to keep pushing through and living. Another thing is that flashbacks aren't the only symptom of PTSD. So a lot of people with PTSD have really bad nightmares, and they can also feel just scared in general and paranoid. Also, if there's a specific date that the brain has incorporated with this traumatic event, then that date will be a time when flashbacks will increase and feelings of stress and anxiety and depression will increase. For me, that was July 4th, the most traumatic thing that happened to me. So it's like every July 4th, I have to be prepared to know that the flashbacks will increase and that it's going to be much, much harder to get through that time. And it happens like before, a little bit before the date and a little bit like after, dealing with the like repercussions after and like the fallout of the really bad day, of the traumatic day that happened. I want to bring up too that I'm on a medication for PTSD. I'm on this medication called Prazosin. It's hard to get a doctor to prescribe Prazosin to you if you are fairly young, but Prazosin has been somewhat of a lifesaver to me. It doesn't stop them all, it really doesn't, but it helps minimize the amount of them that I'm getting. And so that helps me go at a base level where therapy can be effective. A lot of times with different mental disorders, PTSD included, when your symptoms are so bad that it's preventing you from adequately addressing them in therapy, you have to go on a medication to sort of calm it down so that therapy can be effective. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go on any sort of like antidepressant and like antipsychotic or anything like that. But the thing is, view this as a hole. You are in the bottom of a hole. You are stuck. You can't get out. But you take that medication and it gives you a ladder to get out of the hole. But your work isn't done just because you have the ladder. You have to climb up that ladder. So getting a medication to help with sort of a mental health issue is like getting that ladder. But you can't fully climb out without any effort. You have to go to therapy. I find that a combination of therapy and mental health meds are what helps the best. Now, not everyone needs to be on mental health meds, but if your mental health issues are that severe, they can be very, very helpful. I struggled when I was first put on medications because my brain was like, there's something deeply flawed with you and you're a terrible human because you have to be on medications. But I came to accept that no, it's normal. We just live in a society where it's stigmatized to be on medication. One last thing that I have to mention is that sometimes we have to come up with code names to discuss certain people and certain things. So for me, I use letters in the place of people's names, and that helps me so that I can address what they did without saying their names, which helps so that I'm not getting as many flashbacks. I will still get flashbacks talking about these different things that happened, but referring to the people by just a letter, the first letter of their name, it's so much easier. And the frustrating thing about if names become a trigger for someone is that a lot of times these are like common names. And so you're seeing these names all the time in media. I know that there's one specific name where like there's an anime I had to stop watching because the main character has that name. And there's also a show that I really, really love that has a character with that name. I just always, whenever I watch that show, I'm just like, please, please don't say that character's name. Please like make up some code word. And I'm always like fighting with myself because I'm like, I really want to watch this show and I know that there's a likelihood that I will be triggered and get a flashback by it. Oh, and I almost forgot one more thing. This phrase triggered, I really hate how media has changed the phrase triggered to mean just like generally upset or joking about it, because triggered means that you are having something, some trigger for your mental health issues that are making it like really bad. So when you say that you're triggered, you're having a flashback, your depression is getting really, really bad. It's not just like a mild annoyance, like, oh, my cat peed on my rug, I'm triggered. No, you're not. That's not what triggered means. You are annoyed, you are mad, you're frustrated. Use the specific terms. Like, it's so frustrating because in the midst of like trying to tackle my PTSD and like get help for it, I also had to unpack and process the fact that people were using this phrase triggered to mean joking things. I needed to spend that time in therapy addressing the issues that were causing my PTSD. However, I also had to take time away from that to address the fact that people are using the phrase triggered in a joking way when that isn't what the word means. So this video is a bit all over the place. I just wanted to talk about PTSD, talk about some things that I haven't really talked about before with PTSD. I find that PTSD is very complex. There is another type of PTSD called CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very different. I don't have that. However, I wanted to also include a resource down in the description below, which is an article just about CPTSD, because there's a difference between normal PTSD and CPTSD. So I think people should learn about that and understand that, so that if you have someone who is in your life who says they have CPTSD, you can sort of understand the difference between normal and CPTSD. That was all for today's video. If you found it informative, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I upload videos twice a week, so my next video will be uploaded this Tuesday. I hope all of you stick around to watch that one, and until next time, goodbye!